Welcome to the History Unplugged podcast, the unscripted show that celebrates unsung heroes, myth-busts historical lies, and rediscovers the forgotten stories that changed our world. I'm your host, Scott Rank. Hi everyone, welcome to the final part in our series on assassination attempts against presidents. We've looked at assassination attempts against Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. In the final episode, we're looking at threats and assassination attempts against Barack Obama, and for this podcast, this is the most recent history I've ever done on this show. I've gone all the way back to ancient Sumeria, spent a lot of time in the ancient world with Greeks and Romans, and the Middle Ages, a little bit in the 19th century, and some in the early 20th century, but this may be, with only one or two exceptions, the only podcast episode I've done based in the 21st century. Anyway, let's jump into this episode and see if the profile of assassins and the nature of assassination attempts against Barack Obama is similar or different to those of previous presidents. Many people thought that Barack Obama would be specifically targeted for assassination because he was the first African-American president of the United States. Doris Lessing, a novelist and Nobel laureate, said he would probably not last long, a black man in the position of president. Well, when he was elected in 2008, it was to great fanfare. Obama's election was seen as representing a clear benchmark in America's efforts to move beyond race and politics. And his election also came at a time when major changes were coming to the Secret Service. And with the War on Terror nearly in its second decade, there was increased security and fears of an attack against the president. According to a 2009 congressional report, after 9/11, the ranks of officials who received Secret Service protection swelled to an unprecedented number. The list of protectees now included not only presidents, vice presidents, their immediate families, and former presidents, but also presidential candidates, key cabinet secretaries, and congressional leaders, and even their assistants. The congressional report noted that between October 1st, 2008 and September 30th, 2009, the Secret Service also protected 116 heads of state and 58 spouses. The report stated that the service's protection mission has increased and become more urgent due to the increase in terrorist threats and expanded arsenal of weapons that terrorists could use in an assassination attempt or attacks on families. And the report added that domestic threats against political VIPs had grown after Obama was elected. The size of the Secret Service rose from 6,700 employees in 2007 to over 7,000 in 2010. Almost all the new positions were dedicated to protecting government officials. During Obama's first term, the Secret Service protected 32 people, 24 full-time and 8 part-time. It also coordinated security at high-profile events, such as meetings of world leaders and political party conventions. The service's overall budget request grew by 20% since 2008 for so-called protective intelligence activities and efforts required to analyze and investigate threats. But a significant share of the agency's budget remains with the agency's divisions, which investigate financial and other crimes, including 142 national field offices and 22 international offices, which also assist in the search for missing and exploited children. During Obama's candidacy, and throughout his first term in office, numerous politicians and celebrities, including his first Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and his wife, Michelle, publicly commented that his life would be at risk from assassins. When Obama began to receive Secret Service protection as a presidential candidate in 2007, he was consulted in choosing a protectee code name, instructed only that it had to begin with the letter R. He chose the rebellious Secret Service codename Renegade. In keeping with the tradition of having all family members' code names start with the same letter, Michelle Obama became Renaissance, and daughters Sasha and Malia, Rosebud and Radiance, respectively. Secret Service agents have spoken of President Obama's relationship with his detail. One agent told author Ronald Kessler that President Obama, he said, treated us with respect and appreciated what we did. The source added that Obama invited agents to dinner twice, including a party for a relative, both at his house. Agents also spoke of Michelle Obama's friendliness and how she insisted that agents call her by her first name. They said, "Michelle is friendly. She touches you." But Obama's personal physician of more than 20 years, Dr. David Scheiner, said Obama was gracious and polite, but distant. He had an academic detachment. During Obama's first term, the Secret Service was severely criticized for the behavior of several agents on the president's protective detail. In April 2012, 11 agents allegedly engaged prostitutes while assigned to protect the president at the 6th Summit of the Americas in Colombia. Copies of President Obama's schedule may also have been left out in the open when Colombian women were in the rooms of Secret Service members. By April 2012, 9 employees involved had resigned or retired. After the incident was publicized, the Secret Service implemented new rules for its personnel, including prohibitions on visiting non-reputable establishments, it wrote, and consuming alcohol less than 10 hours before starting work. The new rules also restricted who was allowed in hotel rooms. It wasn't the first time Secret Service agents had been involved in scandals. A few weeks after the scandal broke, stories emerged of Secret Service agents hiring strippers and prostitutes prior to Obama's 2011 visit to El Salvador. In 2008, an off-duty agent was arrested in Washington, D.C. for soliciting an undercover police officer posing as a prostitute. At the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, 3 agents were caught partying in a hotel room with alcohol and underage women. Well, Obama was assigned a Secret Service detail equivalent to a full presidential team on May 3, 2007, a year and a half before the 2008 presidential election. It was an unprecedented level of protection for a candidate, but the Secret Service believed the early protection was necessary because of the significance of his campaign to be the first black president and the service's anticipation that Obama's candidacy would spark a backlash. Contrary to the popular view at the time, Obama did not ask for protection. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin asked for it, and he openly acknowledged that his request had a lot to do with race. It wasn't because of any particular threat. Taking Durbin's request into account, Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff authorized Obama's early protection based on the advice of a Congressional Advisory Committee. The same Congressional Advisory Committee that decided who was and who was not a major candidate. The committee was composed of the Speaker of the House Minority Leader, the Senate Majority and Minority Leaders, and one additional member selected by the other members of the committee. By mid-October 2008, as it appeared that Obama would likely win the election, the Secret Service noticed a dramatic increase in the number of threats against his life. The day after Obama was elected, activity surged on hate sites across the internet, and several white supremacist groups saw a spike in membership requests. Secret Service Director Mark Sullivan told a House Appropriations Subcommittee in 2009 that there had been an escalation of threats against Obama. He said, "As the international, domestic, and individual threat environment of the country was elevated during this period, so too was the threat environment for Secret Service-protected individuals, venues, and infrastructure. Since these trends remain at high levels, the Secret Service will use designated funds to hire and train additional staff to evaluate the increased volume of threat information received related to the new president, vice president, and their families." He also said that the bulk of the threats were racial in nature. But Sullivan said the level of threats stabilized after Obama's first year in office, and that Obama was not disproportionately threatened compared to previous presidents. Obama treated the anger in the first year with equanimity. He said he never thought about assassination because, he said, "I've got this pretty terrific crew of Secret Service guys that follow me everywhere I go, but also because I have a deep religious faith and faith in people that carries me through the day." Obama didn't fail to recognize the risk inherent in being America's first black president, but he knew how to keep it in perspective. He implored his supporters on the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, "I think anyone who decides to run for president recognizes that there are some risks involved, just like there are risks in anything." Obama also said he was pretty familiar with history of the Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy assassinations. He said, "Obviously, it was an incredible national trauma, but neither Bobby Kennedy nor Martin Luther King had any Secret Service protection." Barack Obama was targeted before he became president. 20-year-old weapons enthusiast Colin Mackenzie Good planned to use homemade explosives to halt a 2008 presidential candidate's convoy, possibly on Interstate 270, and take him out with a high-powered rifle. He had come to despise Obama's view on gun control. Inside the second-floor bedroom of his parents' Bethesda, Maryland home, Mackenzie Good stored chemicals that are used to make homemade bombs, and he had 3 semi-automatic rifles, 2 shotguns, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, including armor-piercing rounds. When they searched his home in July 2008, authorities also found a fake CIA badge and a map of the Washington area with markings for a presidential motorcade route. Mackenzie Good's friend told police about his plans to detonate the explosives, and he was arrested. Mackenzie Good admitted at his trial that he and a friend had talked about trying to assassinate Obama by halting his convoy with roadside bombs. The prosecutors say they didn't know whether he would have carried out his plot. The judge said it seemed to be a serious plan, and Mackenzie Good told the judge, "The saddest part of the situation is that my own actions are responsible. I cannot tell you how sorry I am. I wish only for the chance to be able to rebuild my life in a positive manner." He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. On July 15, 2008, a week after Hillary Clinton dropped out of the presidential race, Jerry Blanchard was indicted for threatening to kill Senator Obama during a breakfast at the Charlotte Waffle House. 2 customers witnessed Blanchard saying, "Obama and his wife are never going to make it to the White House. He needs to be taken out, and I can do it in a heartbeat." He made similar threats against Obama later at the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Charlotte. Blanchard was overheard on his cell phone saying, "I'll get a sniper rifle and take care of it myself. Someone's got to do it. We both know Obama is the Antichrist." Blanchard was arrested on August 1, 2008, and eventually fined $3,000 and sentenced to a prison term of 1 year and 1 day. Around the same time, FBI agents arrested 3 white supremacists for plotting to kill Obama using a high-powered rifle during his acceptance speech at the party's convention in December. The plot was only uncovered after police seized 2 high-velocity rifles, camouflage clothing, walkie-talkies, wigs, a bulletproof vest, and telescopic gun sights during a routine traffic stop. Federal authorities subsequently downplayed the men as drug addicts who didn't have the means to carry out the plot. They also decided the case didn't meet the legal standard to charge the men with a federal offense. There's a difference between a true threat and the reported racist rantings of drug abusers, said U.S. Attorney Troy Ide. This involved a gang of meth heads who were all impaired at the time. In October 2008, a month before the election, 20-year-old Tennessean Daniel Cowart and 18-year-old Arkansan Paul Schlesselman hatched an ambitious and elaborate plot to kill 88 people and decapitate 14 African Americans before ending their killing spree with the assassination of Barack Obama. They planned to die in a blaze of glory as they drove toward Obama, dressed in white tuxedos and firing out the windows of the car. Cowart's car was emblazoned with "Honk if you love Hitler," a large swastika, and the numbers 14 and 88 on the hood. A friend of the white supremacist skinheads exposed their plans to the Secret Service, which arrested them in October 2008 at Cowart's grandparents' home in rural West Tennessee. Police seized a sawed-off shotgun, a high-powered rifle, a handgun, and several swords and knives. They were charged with conspiracy to steal firearms from a federally licensed firearms dealer, illegal possession of a sawed-off shotgun, and making a threat to a major presidential candidate. Schlesselman pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of threatening to kill and inflict bodily harm upon a presidential candidate, and 1 count of possessing a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. Cowart pleaded guilty to 8 charges, including threatening to kill and inflict bodily harm upon a presidential candidate. He also admitted to shooting out the window of a black church in Tennessee. The Secret Service appeared not to have been well prepared for Obama's inauguration, and there were glaring loopholes in the security. More than 100 VIPs and major campaign donors were screened by metal detectors, but then walked along a public pavement before boarding secure buses without being screened again. It would have been relatively easy for an assassin to mingle with them in order to get close enough to shoot the new president. The night before his inauguration, Obama was warned that a group of Somali extremists were planning a major terrorist attack to take place during the ceremonies. Juan Carlos Zarate, President Bush's deputy national security advisor for combating terrorism, said, "All the data points suggest there was a real threat evolving quickly that had an overseas component, but the threat came to nothing." By the time Obama was elected, the Secret Service kept files on some 40,000 U.S. citizens, including around 400 deemed by the agency to pose a specific threat. The Secret Service has investigated numerous assassination scares throughout Obama's presidency. In July 2012, the agency interviewed a motorcycle police officer who was part of the president's motorcade. He had allegedly shown a fellow officer